attending the ArcGIS Field Apps Integration and Automation session. My name is Zach Sutherby. I'm a product engineer on the ArcGIS Survey 123 team.
And I'm Laura Bedoyan, and I'm a product engineer on the Field Maps team.
Before we dive into the session, please do share your feedback on the session. We do take it very seriously. We do very much appreciate your input and your feedback on the session. It does help drive this session and the future of this session. The agenda for today is we're going to do a little introduction to workflow automation. We have a pretty heavy-duty demo to go through, so we'll get into a pretty good demo, and then we'll wrap up with questions. We know we have an online audience, so we'll make sure to answer a few online questions once we get to the Q&A section. Before diving deep into workflow automation, we're going to take it back up and take a look at field operations. So ArcGIS has a comprehensive mobile solution for your field activities, for your field teams, starting with planning and coordinating. So planning your field work, designing your field workflows, and optimizing your workflow, your work assignments, and getting work to folks out in the field. Moving over to advanced awareness, so having up-to-date information to make decision-making, empowering those field workers to make decisions and do their work the most efficiently. So things like searching and viewing assets, as well as sharing their location back to the platform and back to folks back in the office. Then moving over to more of the meat and potatoes of data capture. Providing tools such as Quick Capture, Field Maps, Survey 123 for intuitive and powerful mobile data collection. So either capturing data through map interfaces, through form interfaces, or big button data capturing experiences with smart form designs, high accuracy data collection, and capturing and editing those locations. And then really where this session will be is over on the integration side. So connecting with either external systems or within the ArcGIS systems, connecting systems and reducing data silos. So being able to share your data and make decisions with your data across various aspects. Automation plays a key role in that, as well as connecting with your enterprise business systems. Now we'll get into an introduction for automation workflows. To cover some common use cases, what are some things that you would like to automate or you may like to automate? What are some of these common areas that we see? Things like alerting and notifications, so sending emails, sending Teams messages, providing SMS messages to various folks for various activities. Things like data management, so downloading attachments, downloading data, archiving data, bringing them from the cloud, from ArcGIS Online into local databases or local systems. Managing offline areas, so automating, creating, updating offline areas to make sure that they're up to date and the best that they can be, as well as data quality testing, ensuring that the data that's coming in meets various standards and specifications. Things like reporting, so generating reports, automating those creation of the reports, and even automating doing something with those reports. We'll see in our demo, taking those reports and uploading it as an attachment to a feature layer, or even taking those reports and bringing them into other third-party systems. As well as content creation. That's a really powerful aspect for automation. So things like creating feature layers, publishing surveys, creating web maps, automating, creating this data either as a response to a scenario. So maybe you, as a scenario happens, you want to be able to batch create some sort of application that can easily go out in the field and do something with. Approvals and triage, so a pipeline as data moves across the various states that it may be in. So from initial submission, someone provides a approval or something, and then it moves on to the next aspect of the workflow. And again, system integration, so bringing data, bringing things into third-party ecosystems or third-party applications. Some common tools for automation. The ArcGIS API for Python is an incredibly powerful tool. Laura will talk about a little bit later on for doing a number of things with your ArcGIS system. So things like admin work, so creating users, creating groups, sharing content to groups, to working with your data directly and various activities there. The ArcGIS connector for Microsoft Power Automate, we'll also see that in our demo, for integrating with those third-party ecosystems or even doing various things with your data through webhooks, as well as data pipelines and workflow manager. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Laura to talk about Microsoft Power Automate.
Thanks, Zach. So like Zach shared, today we're going to focus on Power Automate and Python. So Power Automate is a low, no-code automation platform built on Microsoft 365 with a lot of built-in connectors. They have lots of templates to get you to help you get started. And we'll show you exactly how to configure this. So what exactly is a webhook? Raise your hand if you have played with webhooks before. Nice, okay, good portion of you, pretty cool. But those who haven't played around with webhooks are very similar to, let's say you're visiting your friend and you're gonna ring a doorbell and say, hey, I'm here. That's basically what a webhook is saying. The webhook rings the doorbell when they're ready to visit and they're already telling you, here's my information, I'm ready for you to do something with it. So there's that initiator. The server saying, hey, I'm ready, here you go, client, and there's the receiver, and the receiver's like, I'm gonna do something with it. So there's the payload that gets transferred over with the webhook to tell you what exactly you're gonna do with this trigger. So like we just shared, there's that trigger, an event that starts, that's that doorbell when you're seeing your friend, and there's the action. Well, what are you gonna do together, right? What do you wanna do once that action happens? And we have a lot of built-in webhooks in ArcGIS. So these are already configured for you. It's low, no code. You can do things like add and update, delete feature services, add and update attachments, create reports, and interact with your portal on Enterprise. I'll hand it back to Zach to go over some of the Esri connectors.
Yep. So we have three different types of connectors. We have the ArcGIS Enterprise, ArcGIS Online, as well as the platform connector. And they all, Enterprise and Online have similar workflows. So things like when a record is added or updated in a feature layer, then we'll proceed with doing something in our webhook. Additionally, things like if attachments have been added, removed, deleted, added or deleted, and then various actions. So things like adding attachments, doing data management, geocoding, geo-enrichment, updating your data with various powerful activities on the platform, as well as platform actions. So things like those geocoding, geo-enrichment, routing, creating features within your data. And then for those connector triggers, we'll see this live in our Power Automate in the demo. But this is just kind of a high-level overview of, when a record is created in a feature layer, that's our trigger. That's where we start. That's where what is initiating our flow. So when a new record is submitted in our feature layer, there may be multiple, because this runs every so often, there may be multiple records that have been submitted. So we need to use a for each loop to fetch those changes for each of those records that have been inserted into that layer. So that's why we're seeing this for each loop with those fetch updates. Essentially the output of our trigger is a changes URL, a URL that we'll use to extract those changes. So that fetch updates is then extracting those changes on each of those individual records, which will then initiate another for each because there may be multiple of those. Here we're just sending an email. We'll go in and send an email. So we'll see this in our Power Automate demo, but this is kind of just an intro for that. Now, for those who have been using webhooks, who's using the when a survey response is submitted trigger? Yes, a fair number of folks. A heads up on the future of the when a survey response is submitted trigger. Survey 123 is transitioning away from that when a survey response is submitted trigger to standardize on the feature layer webhook triggers. This is really powerful because then you can have survey, field maps, map viewer, various other client applications who are editing that data also run those webhooks. It's not just siloed to the Survey 123 ecosystem. Now, for those who are using the when a survey response is submitted trigger, your existing workflows are going to continue to work. They're not just going to automatically break overnight. Those will continue to work for the future. You may know Survey 123 is working on building next generation Survey 123 applications. That next generation Survey 123 mobile application will standardize on those feature layer webhooks. So that next generation Survey 123 mobile app won't work with the when a survey response is submitted trigger. And then I'll hand it back over to Laura to talk about the ArcGIS API for Python.
Thanks, Zach. So now jumping into Python, Python is very different from a webhook. Kind of the description we gave before with a webhook being that, doorbell ringing, it's ready with the action and the trigger. Python is very different because you're generating a request, you're getting a response when you want to. And show of hands, who has used the ArcGIS API for Python or just Python in general? Nice. Okay, good amount. Well, like Zach also shared earlier, the API for Python has lots of built-in support for your ArcGIS ecosystem. And you can use it to create custom workflows for your GIS administration or content management like you'll see today. And this is a nice visual, but kind of shows you all the different modules that you can use in Python. So today we're going to be focusing on the GIS module seen in green, and also the features module seen in purple. And the features module in purple is really built on top of the ArcGIS REST endpoint. So what was kind of talked about in the plenary, where everything is built on top of the ArcGIS server and what is built at the REST endpoint, the ArcGIS API for Python is a great way to build on top of that. So getting started, you have a few ways to kind of use Python, and I'll be curious to hear afterwards of what folks are using for your setup, but ArcGIS Online has your own web-based notebook environment with the environment already configured. You don't have to do any package management. Everything's already installed for you. Same goes for Pro. There's a built-in environment package manager for you. But if you're feeling fancy and you want to explore on your own running Python scripts locally on your machine, you can install Python with other package managers like Conda or pip, or host in a completely different cloud environment. And now Zach and I will kind of talk about when to choose between Python and Power Automate, because if you've seen, they're pretty similar, but also quite different. So did you want to start with maybe Power Automate?
Absolutely, yeah, thank you, Laura. So with Power Automate, the advantages of Power Automate is, event triggers an automatic push to an action. So like we saw with the when a new record is submitted to a feature layer, when that happens, then something automatically happens in our Power Automate webhook. Power Automate is fully managed within Microsoft's cloud ecosystem, so you are working within that Microsoft system. It is a really good tool for approvals, notifications, and various data triggers. So when something happens, you need something to happen, you need a result to happen almost as soon as possible, as nearly as soon as possible. It includes those native ArcGIS built-in triggers like we showed a little bit earlier a few slides ago. It is constrained to those available pre-built connectors. So if you're looking for more extensibility, more customization, if there's a connector that's not quite there that you're looking for, you wouldn't quite be able to get that into Power Automate. It does have a drag and drop no-code, low-code, no-code interface, so it is a bit more intuitive to bring things in and make those connections. Then I'll hand it back over to Laura for Python scripting.
Thanks. So yeah, Python is really good at running those manually or pre-scheduled tasks. So you can run Python notebooks on a scheduled task, as we'll show you before, but there's no like trigger or automatic action that happens. And it's more configurable. You can put it on premise in a disconnected environment or in the cloud. And it's really ideal for those admin tasks, but it requires you to have a high level of knowledge of the Python API, but you can get really fancy with the logic as you want. And for similarities, of course, you have to manage both of these and making sure any updates don't break your configurations and the response to offline workflows. If you're wanting to sync changes, you'll need to make sure you go back into connectivity for those triggers or notebooks to update. And now we're going to dive into a demo, and Zach is going to get us started.
Yep. So in our demo, both Laura and I are admins for a geology firm, a fictitious geology firm. And now in our fictitious geology firm, it's just Laura and I, hypothetically, as employees in this firm. We need to be able to have a way for external contractors, folks who, externally to register for an account within our ArcGIS organization. We need help doing some field work, doing some field operations. So that's where we'll need those external contractors to come in. So the first thing that they'll do is they're going to register for an account within our ArcGIS organization. We need to be able to share a field maps map and share content with those contractors that are external to our organization. So we'll start in a Survey 123 form. It's going to be in a hub site. I'll get over to that in a little bit. We'll have a Survey 123 form embedded in an ArcGIS hub site for those contractors to come to, fill out that survey for registration. Once they submit that survey, or after they submit that survey, we're going to have an ArcGIS API for Python, or a notebook in our ArcGIS Online ecosystem to create the user account based on the name and email address that they entered, and then assign a task in a tasks feature layer to that user. We'll then have a Power Automate flow that then sends a notification in Teams to that user, so they can go and open up field maps and perform their work. That's the next box here. Is we'll see in field maps, they'll perform their work, complete their task, and then fill out an exit survey. And then we'll have a Power Automate webhook to generate a report from that work that they just did and upload it as an attachment to that tasks layer. And then I'll hand it back over to Laura to talk about tasks in a little bit more detail.
Thanks. Yes, very briefly before we dive into the demo. So how many of you here have used tasks in your field operations? Okay, nice. So I'll just very quickly show you the schema for a task layer. So you can turn any feature layer into a task layer, and you can dictate what kind of task is it? What's the status? Is it in progress? Is it assigned? And you can determine what assignee gets assigned to that certain task. So in our case, you'll see all of our tasks are specific geological assignments, like working on a borehole or going into a fault trench. And our status is going to be, in progress or, completed. And our assignee will be, our contractor for the day. And all of these fields are domains. So keep that in mind as we work through the demo, that these 3 fields are domains, and that's why there's some additional logic that we might need to make into our Python workflow. But here's a nice picture of the schema, and it's also seen on our help topic. And now I will hand it back to Zach.
Thank you, Laura. So now let's take a look and let's run this demo. So I'm going to come over. And here I have my ArcGIS hub site. So this is what we would send out to the public. This is what we would send to those folks externally to come to this hub site and register for an account and register for access to complete their task. So I'll come down here. We have our ArcGIS Survey 123 survey. So our contractor details will be John Doe. And then I'll enter an email address. Now, we need to choose what field assignment that we want to use. Keep in mind these field assignments. So we have our Ontario, Palm Springs, Redlands. We're using a little trick as to how to get these field assignments in here. So in this scenario, I'll select Redlands. Now I need to verify I have all of my personal protective equipment. I have my goggles, my steel-toed shoes, my hard hat, and my gloves. Now, because we're going to have external people on site, we need to know, what vehicles they're using in case we get any reports of suspicious activity. So we'll store their vehicle. This John Doe is driving a vehicle one, and vehicle model will be vehicle one model, and their license plate 1 ABC 234. Any comments that they may have, and then just a signature that they are good to come on site and perform the task. So I'll go ahead and submit that survey. And then with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Laura to talk about an ArcGIS notebook that will be used to create that user account. So over to you, Laura.
Thanks, Zach. All right. Very good. Okay, so here I am in ArcGIS Notebooks, and you can get there by in your content page selecting the Notebooks button here. And in this, you can create a new notebook and schedule it on a task. And you can do that by creating a task and then going through that whole flow. So in this situation, we have this notebook. We're going to run it manually, but in production environment, you could have this run every 15 minutes or an hour, pulling new contractors that you have at your site. So I'm going to kind of walk you through a few things here. We're going to read that registration form that Zach just submitted, and here it is. It's just a feature layer. And you'll see it be, you'll see Zach's new registration record be input here. So there's our John Doe, and this is our task layer. So like I mentioned before, our task layer, we're gonna have our task type, and today we're gonna be doing a borehole assignment, and these are our other task fields. And our goal is to change this status field to be assigned and assign John Doe this particular task in Palm Springs that is a borehole. So we wanna add him as an assignee to this domain and update the task so that he's ready to go out into the field. So I've already run the notebook, but just to get you started, since some of you have not worked with Python, when you're writing a Python notebook, the first thing you want to do is import all of your libraries. So libraries are that way that you can really customize the logic in your workflow. And the biggest kind of big player that we're going to be using today is that GIS module. And we're going to use the GIS class, the feature layer class, and the feature class to extract all of those custom methods that the ArcGIS for Python API team has made for us. So if once we create this GIS object from the GIS class, we can use all those built-in methods just as you would normally through the UI. So that is what I'm doing here. And in any notebook, when you're getting started, it's a good idea to put all those libraries in this cell so you can keep track of what you're doing. And if you're in a local environment, you've configured everything, you can instantiate your GIS object by connecting to your account and authenticating in this way. We're using home because that is our current cloud environment. But you'll see this GIS object as we work through the notebook here. And just to help us kind of get acquainted with this flow, because it can get a little, in the weeds, because there are many steps. But as a beginner in Python, the best thing of advice that I can share with you is to really map out that flow of what you want. So like we mentioned before, we really just want to get those registrations. We want to connect to those other layers. We want to load those other users and create the account for our new mobile worker. And we want to assign them tasks. So what I've done here is I've actually created many different methods for us to be able to connect to these different steps. So that's one tip I can give you as a beginner in Python, is to really map out your flow and then write specific logic in those methods. Now, you're probably like, what is a method? I'll show you in a moment. I have this configuration dictionary where I've basically helped us figure out, well, what is my registration URL? basically what is that feature layer, what's my task layer. I've assigned all of these custom fields from my task layer, or not my task, this is my registration, from my registration form layer and my task layer. I'm adding my user to a group. So this is just a way that we can help us later on when we're creating this big workflow of how to interact with our ArcGIS. So you can see I have 18 cells hidden. I have lots of helper functions that will help us kind of create this flow. So let's kind of go over again of the logic here. So first, I want to fetch the new registrations from the registration form. So I've created a helper layer from above that takes in several parameters. So I have our GIS module, our registration URL, and I want to look back for new registrants for the past 3 hours. And what that's going to do is return a pandas data frame. That's just a big word for a table. And I'm going to use this table, that's the pandas data frame, later on when I'm extracting values for me to kind of configure later on. And under the hood, I'm using that ArcGIS Python API method. I'm using the feature layer class and the feature set class, so I can take a look at all of the features in that layer. Okay, step 2 is I want to connect to my task layer. I want to figure out what are those unassigned tasks that I want to assign John Doe to. So again, just stepping back for a moment, I know I want to connect to these layers, and I do want to read from this registrants table, and I've created these methods that I can use to do that logic, and that has all been customizable by me. So I've written that code so I can do that, and it's very different from Power Automate, which has already done something for you. So these methods are the ways that we can kind of have that custom logic for us. So I've created a new task layer, and that is made from the feature layer class, and I'll be using that later on. So step 3 is I want to load all the existing users from my ArcGIS so I can create my new mobile worker, a new account that hasn't already been in the system. So for every row in my new registrants table, again, that's everything from the past 3 hours. So you can use this for loop to iterate through everything in your registrants table. And that's this, new registrants, that's that pandas data frame. I want to extract my user's email address. And I'm going to check if it's missing or not. If it's missing, then I just want to skip. But excuse me, if it's not missing, I want to go to a next step and make sure there's no one in our organization that has that same email and mobile worker user type. So I've extracted already the field assignment from the registration form and the email if they have it. And now I've made past this step. Let's say there's no duplicates, they're not in our org. I now want to make them their new account. So I'm going to create a new username, and I have some customization I've put in there. And this is using another helper function that I made called generate username. And another tip that I highly suggest is really modularizing your logic to match each step that you want in your workflow to a method. And then you can create just a little stub, which is basically just a method that returns nothing, just so then you can understand the orchestration of your notebook and your workflow. So here I'm taking in our registrant's full name, the existing usernames. I'm going to create that custom username for them. Next, I'm going to create that mobile worker account, and I'm going to add them to a specific group. Now, this step I think is pretty cool because it really speaks to the Python language in its heart, that it's an object-oriented programming language. And basically what I've done here is this, when I need to add a new user to the group, I need to put in their username. Well, how do I get that username? I need to use a user object that I've created in my previous step. And so kind of understanding how you can extract information from each method and return is crucial here. So you'll see in this previous step, I returned a new user. This is a user object type, and it has many different parameters and methods that come with it. I can do many things with this. This new user has a username. It has many things in it. I know it's just, 7 lines or 7 words, but you can do many things with this variable, and you can plug it into this method to add it to that group. So next is we're going to find those tasks, those unassigned tasks, so we can plug in our task layer into this method and return a list of all of those features where my query is true. So I was able to query my task feature layer and search where are those unassigned tasks where my field worker is going out today. And now if you can remember before our task layer, one of our fields is a domain. So I want to add them to that domain. I want them to be an assignee. So I'm going to plug in as a parameter to this helper method I've made our task layer, our assignee field, because you could change it. You're not tied to this. And and his name and all of that. And next, I actually want to update that domain so that now we see that this mobile worker has assigned tasks and they're ready to go out into the field. So I kind of printed everything back here. We can see that everything was successful and that John Doe was added to the group. They were added to their Redlands task and they've been processed. So just taking a quick step back, this workflow, I made this way before I made the code because I knew I needed to really drill down into what logic do I want to have this process to work. So when you're automating these workflows, it's important to think about those discrete steps so you can be successful in what you're doing. And now I will hand it back to Zach for Power Automate.
So here's our tasks layer, and now we can see that Redlands task, or that Redlands assignment, has been assigned and is now assigned to John Doe. We now need to inform John Doe that their task is ready, that they can go about and complete their activity. So to do that, we created a flow in Microsoft Power Automate that looks at our tasks layer and will then send a Teams notification to John Doe. So here I am in Microsoft Power Automate. And one thing to note here, I'm in the Shared With Me kind of tab within Power Automate. A really powerful feature is all of these flows here, or both of our flows here, both Laura and I are co-owners of these flows. So if, for example, I may be out of office that day or a day and something may happen to the flow, Laura can come in and I'll select this flow here. We can see as co-owners, Laura is also a co-owner on this floor, on this flow, so she can come in and make changes or check out why the flow may not have been running. So I'll come and edit this flow. And we can see the first thing that we're using is, when a record is updated in our task layer. So we're using the when a record is updated in a feature layer trigger to go about and run the flow. So here we're using that contracted tech assignments task layer that we were just looking at. Now we're going to get data from that task layer. So now we're going to query the task layer. Here we're using, again, that contracted tech assignments. And in our query, we're going to use that status field where it's equal to 1, which is assigned. So we're going to query that tasks layer and get all tasks that are currently assigned. Now within a for each loop, because there may be multiple, in our case there was only one, but because there may be multiple tasks that are assigned, we have to have our next action within a for each loop. So for each assigned task, we're going to send a message in Teams. So here we're using an adaptive card, and adaptive cards are very powerful. You'll see when we switch over to take a look at the Teams message that we send. Microsoft has very powerful templates for creating adaptive cards, and they also have a site to help configure and create this JSON structure for your adaptive card. So all we're doing is we're posting in a Teams channel, specifically a Test Dev Summit Integration and Automation Teams channel that Laura and I have created. A specific channel within that Teams, and then the message, the adaptive card in this situation that we're going to post. So I'm going to hand it back over to Laura to show what John Doe received on the mobile device and go about completing the task in field maps.
Cool. So like Zach shared, this is the adaptive card, and I know it's a big word, adaptive card, but it's really just some JSON that you can edit and make it really cool. And this is me, again, Zach and I are just mimicking this workflow, but pretending that I'm John Doe. We've made this adaptive card that can help the user get notified that their tasks are ready. So I'm gonna click Open in Field Maps. And it's having a moment.
That's Teams on the right.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. Teams in the right. Yes. And now I'm going to log in to Field Maps. And what was the username that we created? One second. Let me check what the field name was. So this will kind of show you how that task layer works actually. So I'm taking their username as the code. So this is just helping me get that in. JMobileDoe, and that's that customization I put in. And I have given JMobileDoe a temporary password that I now want him to change. Redlands, of course. All right. All right, so as you can see, we have one assigned task, and I've been assigned to do a borehole assignment in Redlands. And if those of you don't know what a borehole is, basically, as a geotechnical engineer, sometimes you go out into the field and there's a hole and you need to go and look at and measure the strike and dip and the sediment that you see and whatever height that you're at. So we're gonna be doing that today. So I'm gonna start my task, and I've made sure I have my pickaxe, my scraper, and my run compass with me. So I'm going to collect a new borehole. We're gonna be doing some borehole sites on the Esri campus. And I'm going to collect a new borehole. And let's do it right here next to this tree. And this is a related record, but I'm just gonna do one borehole for now for the sake of time. And I'm just gonna collect one height, related height at this borehole. And it's just gonna be from 0 to 3, and the strike is going to be north 72 west, and my dip is going to be 23 northeast. Ooh, that doesn't look nice. And then the description is gonna be cobbly, silty, sill, sand, dry, slightly moist. And I'm done, and submit. So now I have, let's just say that we're doing just one borehole for the day. So I can go back to my task and click finish. And now I need to fill out the exit survey before I leave today. So I'm gonna do that. I'm going to sign in with my account. You don't need to send Zach an email. And Zach has set up this survey so that it has already auto-populated my survey form to be my assignment and my task type. And I'm just going to go through the completion form. So yes, I completed my task for the day. I added in a calculated expression, so it just added 8 hours for the purpose of the demo. And so yes, it's been 8 hours, no hazards encountered, no hazards encountered. And now I'm gonna sign and certify that I completed for today. Cool. And I'm going to hand it back to Zach, and he's going to show us our next Power Automate flow.
Thank you, Laura. So I'll go ahead. We're back in our tasks layer. I'll refresh this. Now, John Doe has completed their task for the day. We now want to generate a report from John Doe's task, from the activity that John Doe did. So we can see here in our tasks layer, our status is completed. And then that sign out survey was actually pointing to our same tasks layer. So all of that information that Laura just filled out, the start time, the end time, the elapsed time, as well as the confirmation from John Doe that they agree to the amount of hours worked. We want to go about, as well as the signature from that survey, it's all submitted to our tasks layer. So now we want to create a report and attach it as an attachment to this tasks layer. So back over here in Power Automate, I'm going to open up our second flow here. And what I'm going to do is edit this. Again, we're still using the when a record is updated in a feature layer. We want to know when something's changed in our tasks layer, when that data has been updated in our task layer. So again, we're still using our contracted tech assignments tasks layer as the input for the when a record is updated. Now this flow uses a slightly different workflow. We're going to use the fetch updates, changes, or deletions action with this workflow. So for each change, we're going to go and request those changes from the output of our when a record is updated, the changes URL. So the input for this, we're still using our contracted tech assignments, and we're dynamically populating the changes URL from our trigger, from the very first block here that we see in Power Automate. So for each of those changes, we'll extract those changes. And again, another apply to each, because there may be multiple changes. We have a little condition here. So we need to know, because we have two flows, or because this flow is specifically interested in that tasks layer when John Doe is signed out, we need to know, okay, what's the specific state? When did John Doe fill out the survey? So what we're using just for this demo is John Doe's said yes, or they've confirmed that their elapsed time, they're happy with those 8 hours that they worked. So we have a little condition here to say, okay, John Doe has successfully, it does agree to those 8 hours that they worked. If true, we're going to go ahead and create a report. We're going to use the ArcGIS connector create report function in here. So here we're using our field tech assignment completion form, so that form that Laura filled out after field maps. Our feature layer, again, is that contracted tech assignments. I have a report template that I've uploaded with that survey, or there's a report template that is already associated with that survey, so I've selected that report template. The object ID comes from this apply to each. So in our current for each loop here, for those changes, we're using the object ID of that record that's been updated. We don't need a specific where clause because we are using the individual object ID that's going to be unique per record. And then we're creating a dynamic report name. So here we're using the contractor's username, dynamically passing that in as the name of the report, and then dash certificate of completion. And we want to know, they've completed it. And then we specify the output format as a PDF. Now, the output of the create report function here in Power Automate is going to be a URL for where that report lives up in the cloud, up in the API. So we need to use the HTTP connector in order to extract that file, because we want to do something with that file. We'll see our next thing here is we're going to add it as an attachment. We need to get that file. We need to extract the file from the URL in order to add it as an attachment to our assignments layer. So here, this URL is automatically populating from the output of the create report. It's going to be the result file / URL. And that's going to be the URI for this HTTP connector. Well, a GET request is just fine just to extract that file. And that's really all we need to do. Now we have version of that file, an in-memory version of that file, that we can then use the add attachment function. So again, within my content, that contracted tech assignments layer, for the object ID, so for the record that we're currently working with in our loop here, the attachment name. So the attachment name in this case, I've just used the same name as the report name. And then the file content is the body of the HTTP, that file that we received from the URL. So if I come back here and I refresh, let's see that attachment. So I'll select our redlands here, and I'll scroll over. So now we can see we have two attachments on our record. We have the signature from when John Doe completed the activity in the sign-out survey, as well as the report that we generated in that Power Automate flow. So I'll go ahead and download this report and open this up. Not the most beautiful report template you've probably ever seen, but just for the sake of demo, the task was redlands. The task type was borehole that we completed. The contractor was John Doe. They worked 8 hours. They agreed to that time. Here was the time that they started. Here's the time that they ended, as well as their signature. So now I have this report from John Doe's activity that I can then file away, save, or do whatever I want with. So coming back to our slides, we worked through all of these workflows of registering, creating that user, like you saw in Laura's notebook, of creating that user and assigning them that task, sending that Teams notification for John Doe to go about completing their activity, opening up field maps, completing the task in field maps, linking out to Survey123 to complete the assignments, or to fill out the sign-out form, and then automating, generating that report of that activity, of that task, and uploading it as an attachment to our task layer. Now, getting to wrapping up, a number of resources for helping you get started with automation or for referencing with automation when working with the Python API. The ArcGIS API for Python documentation is extensive. It is very, very well written. There's a ton of samples. There's a ton of examples for you to reference of various workflows or various activities, as well as the reference documentation for every single class, every single method, everything that's going on in the ArcGIS API for Python. The ArcGIS API for Python team also has a GitHub repo that they have a number of those samples, as well as for you to report some questions or any issues that you may be having. The Field Maps team also curates a GitHub repo for a number of scripts to help with your Field Maps tasks or your Field Maps activities. Power Automate documentation for the ArcGIS connector will be very helpful for getting started with creating Power Automate flows that use the ArcGIS connectors. Survey123 team also has developer documentation that also documents a number of tutorials and Python scripts that may help with automating tasks that, as a Survey123 user, you may find interesting. And then we have a little QR code at the bottom. Laura's notebook, as well as those Power Automate flows, we've exported and uploaded to a GitHub repo. So if you're interested in those, there's a little QR code to access that. As we are coming to the end of Dev and Tech Summit, there's only a couple of sessions that we'll highlight. The ArcGIS API for Python team has an presentation tomorrow morning on cloning and migrating content, and that'll be an interesting one to attend, as well as the field apps. Both Survey123 and Field Maps have a road ahead session tomorrow morning as well. Again, please do share your feedback on this session. We do look at it. It does help drive the future of this session. So with that, thank you very much for attending the session. We very much appreciate you being here, and we will open it up for questions. We have any online items? We have one question online.
To send the link directly for the GitHub, so I just sent it.
Okay.
Yeah.
setup for example here, if on enterprise, will require notebook server, right?
The question was, are notebooks for enterprise available? Yes. The hosted notebooks? Yes. Which version of enterprise?
It's a general question, but it's a requirement to have a notebook server to have this set up.
Yeah. Yes, to have the online setup. But you could very well just create it on your own local server too.
And you can run the notebooks in ArcGIS Pro as well if you didn't have notebook server. So you could, and I think you can even schedule, I'm not sure about notebooks, but Python scripts you can schedule in ArcGIS Pro as well.
Yeah. Over here.
For Power Automate, you have your own layer, or can it be anything based off like a share?
The question was, do you have, what kind of privileges do you have to have for your feature layer to run a Power Automate flow?
That's a great question. So if I switch back over to Power Automate, we can see for this fetch changes, for example, these are layers that our user account owns. So the user account that I have for my ArcGIS connection, it does depend on what you're using in your ArcGIS connection. Some of them do use like this add attachment here. In this scenario, it's checking for layers in and it's using my content, but I can also use either my organization, so layers that are shared with me. I can connect this one and add an attachment to layers that may be shared with me. In the back?
So the migration from serving one, two, three connector to the new are those requirements to premium license for Power Automate to access?
Yep, great question. So the question was migrating over to the when a record is added or when a record is updated, the feature layer webhook triggers, does that require a premium Power Automate license? Yeah, so the ArcGIS connector in Power Automate is a premium connector and will require premium access.
Oh.
But one is Esri looking at allowing us to fire notebooks on demand remotely. Just by calling like a borehole request or something like that. And then two, did you report as one thing and did that, or was that something else?
Yep, great question. So two questions. One was running notebooks either through a URL, initiating a notebook through a URL or another mechanism. And then the second question was the reporting functionality that we used in Power Automate. So in Notebook Server, for the first question, Notebook Server has a URL that you can use to run the notebook. In ArcGIS Online, that's not there yet. I know that's something that the ArcGIS Online team is looking at, so that would be very good feedback to share with the folks over in ArcGIS Online, that's something that you're interested in, and even more about your workflow that you can envision seeing with that. And then as for Power Automate, we did use the Survey 123 create report. So over here in Power Automate, this create report action in the ArcGIS connector is using that Survey 123. So here, this is where I've selected the specific survey that I want to generate the report from. So this is essentially the same as creating reports through the Survey 123 website.
Go ahead.
For ArcGIS Enterprise, is there a way to have a webhook trigger running a publish to a process?
The question was, in ArcGIS Enterprise, is it a way to have a webhook run a geoprocessing tool? I'm not sure. That's a great question. We can bring that back to the tech zone and talk to the folks who create the Power Automate, ArcGIS Power Automate actions and see if that's something that's possible. You could, with that HTTP connector that we used over here, you could use the HTTP connector to run the REST URL for that geoprocessing service, yeah.
And also note that the enterprise hosted feature services in 12.0, they're now available. They have the what was that? I forget which endpoint that they just enabled, but
Track changes?
track changes are now enabled for enterprise hosted services for Power Automate. Yeah.
The report feature for being an ArcGIS Online thing, is there a plan to bring that to the place?
Yep. So the question was, generating reports, currently is available in ArcGIS Online. Is there plans to bring that over into ArcGIS Enterprise? Yes, that is something we're actively working on, and we're hoping for the next release or two of ArcGIS Enterprise to be available. So it will be alongside the Survey 103 local website installer. There's some additional configuration that we're foreseeing with ArcGIS Enterprise, but generating reports in ArcGIS Enterprise is something that the Survey 103 team is working on and is hoping in the near future. All right, and Laura and I will still be up here for a few minutes after the session, and you can always come and talk to us over in the tech zone next door with any additional questions. Thank you very much for attending this session. We do very much appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy your conference.